Welcome back to the Bentonville Beacon podcast, where we're sharing stories and advice from the leaders sparking the rise of Bentonville, one of the fastest growing and most dynamic cities in the United States, nestled in the Ozark Mountains of Northwest Arkansas in the heartland of America. Hey, I'm your host, James Bell, and it is my absolute pleasure today to introduce you to Natalie Shew. Natalie is one of three women that I deeply admire here in Northwest Arkansas for their tenacity and vision and just who they are as human beings. So Natalie Shew is one of the three co-founders of FemHealth Founders. The other two are April Roy and Elizabeth Pringer. We'll talk a little bit about them too in their absence. So FemHealth Founders is an organization that is looking to launch 50 women-led FemHealth companies by 2026. Is that right?
That's right. You got it.
Awesome. Well, Natalie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, James. Glad to be here.
Yeah, let's get started. What should the Bentonville Beacon audience know about Natalie Shew?
Well, I'm a Memphian. I'm from Memphis, but now I'm in Northwest Arkansan, and I just love it here. It's one of my favorite places I've ever lived. I've lived all over the world, and so we've settled here, and this is home now, and I love it here. So I'm an entrepreneur. I've worked in a lot of different roles and companies over the years, but I've found my home also in entrepreneurship. And I have recently launched a company called EmployWell. So I can tell you a little bit about that if you like.
Please do. In fact, share with us about EmployWell and talk about who do you serve?
Yeah.
What's that big problem that you just had to solve, and how do you do it?
Well, I'm a very problem-obsessed person, so I get really interested in solving big problems, and I've uncovered a pretty big one. So EmployWell is a healthcare engagement platform to recognize, reward, and retain our healthcare talent. So we are working on a really big problem in the healthcare space right now, which is turnover and burnout of our healthcare workers. You may have noticed over the pandemic, there was a lot about just healthcare workers being burned out, our nurses, leaving the profession in droves. But that problem hasn't really tapered off. So the pandemic really just highlighted these issues of turnover and burnout in healthcare. And that, spike has not really leveled off. And that's because it's basically the pandemic kind of is the straw that broke the camel's back. But there's so much more going on, and we've got to solve this problem. So I am doing my part with EmployWell to help solve this problem. It's a $20 billion a year problem in healthcare right now, just in the U.S., and so what we're doing, we have a product called Healthcare Heroes. It's a B2B, or I like to call it B2 clinic software that is human powered, but tech enabled to help solve some of this attrition that's going on in healthcare. So we have a recognition program to basically increase peer-to-peer recognition. We incentivize engagement through rewards that are meaningful to employees. And then we really drive retention by building cultures of transparency in healthcare settings. It's a bottom-up approach to the healthcare challenges we're seeing today. And I'm actually starting in the fertility space because the reason why I started this company is I'm very, very interested in improving the patient experience. And this will kind of set us up for the FemHealth Founders conversation. But I have a disease called endometriosis. I went through infertility because of that diagnosis. So 1 in 10 women have endometriosis. It's a very painful disease. It's common, but it's very understood, and there aren't any treatments really to help with it. And so ended up going through IVF, which was the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my entire life. And what I realized is that my patient experience was so negative. I wanted to change it. I wanted to change it for me, for the patient sitting next to me in the waiting room, for my friends and family who've been through this as well. And as I dug into it, what I realized is that, the poor patient experience and outcomes, the root cause of that, one of them is that we're not taking care of our healthcare workers.
That's right.
So if we can take better care of our healthcare workers and the nurses and the people delivering care for us, I think we'll see a huge improvement in patient experience and care. And then just to round that off, 90% of nurses are women. Most of the patients going through fertility treatment are women, especially the invasive part of the treatment. And so we're seeing a lot bigger impacts on women, in the healthcare space, just generally. And so, of course, I'm very passionate about improving just the general livelihood of women in their work and at home.
Well, that's a fantastic cause. I mean, women are taking care of us in healthcare, largely in nursing. Right. We get into talking about, more about FemHealth Founders. One of the things I've observed also is that historically, men have been, I'm going to use air quotes for the folks who are just listening. I never use air quotes. Well, sometimes I do. Solving women's health problems.
That's right.
And on top of that, there's actually not that much data on women's health, and we need a lot more. We can do so much better.
Yes, we can.
So I love what you are doing. Will you, before we jump into FemHealth Founders, though, will you talk about your two co-founders and what their companies are doing?
Yeah, gladly. So I have two incredible co-founders with FemHealth Founders, and that is April Roy and Elizabeth Pringer. April Roy has a company called FemPack. She's doing incredible things in the menstrual equity and access space. So she has a product that you can, it's an emergency care, menstrual care kit that you can use in emergency situations or anytime, keep it in your purse, etc. But April has a huge passion around really just, period poverty, menstrual, access, understanding the unique issues and things that we as women deal with in terms of menstruation and beyond. So that's her company. Elizabeth Pringer has a product called the Acicle, and it is a postpartum recovery product to help with things like vaginal tearing, anal fissures, all, as she says, quote, the lovely things that happen to us during childbirth. And so she's really, it's kind of an interesting combination because I'm more in the fertility space.
Right.
April starts with the menstrual space, which obviously impacts women for a long time over their lives. And then Elizabeth is in that postpartum recovery space.
You are quite the combo.
Right.
And incidentally, I, as you know, mentored Elizabeth when she was going through the Arkansas iFund and doing customer discovery about Acicle and these problems. So
we are so grateful for your mentorship, and I know she is.
Well, I'm glad to help out any way I can. You are doing the work. So, you and Elizabeth and April were all separately working on women's health problems before you started FemHealth Founders. Will you talk about the founding story, sort of why did you have found Women's Health? Let's try that question again. That's gone so awry. I'm just going to start the question again. Sorry, man. Okay, I know where to start off here. So you and Elizabeth and April were all separately working on problems in women's health, and you founded FemHealth Founders.
Yep.
And I talked about your big, hairy, audacious goal a moment ago. So will you talk about FemHealth Founders and, what's the founding story, sort of the why and how you got started, and what's your vision? What are you doing about it?
Sure. So we love talking about this part because it's all about story, at the end of the day. And for us, each of our stories are very different, but we have this recurring theme throughout our journeys as entrepreneurs and as women that, really brought us together. And not to mention that our community brought us together too. Mm-hmm. So the three of us met each other through connections, local connections of all male mentors that were like, hey, I recognize that you might benefit from getting to know somebody in your space. So, FemHealth is sort of this new thing in a sense, like when you think of the market of women's health innovation. Right. And here, in Arkansas, it's just a small group of us. There aren't many of us working on these types of solutions and products. So we got connected with each other, and it was like immediate, fireworks. It's like, you're working in this space. Oh my gosh. And then, you have this issue and you've dealt with this problem and you understand what endometriosis is or what unexpected, bleeding is or vaginal tearing is. Awesome. So we don't have to explain that that's a problem. And so when we got together, it was just, I think as we started talking about the issues, it got more into some of the business barriers that we've dealt with as entrepreneurs and feeling like we were sort of having to explain that there is a market for this to people in our circles and, through accelerators we had been through. And to no fault to the people running those accelerators, it just, it was sort of like, we don't really know how to help and guide you. Yeah. And so FemHealth Founders was birthed out of this need for a more curated experience to the women's health market, to the women's health issues, and then also to this third piece of women founders trying to grow and scale companies and accessing very little of the capital that's out there in the market.
Yeah, that's cool. So you've received a lot of guidance and support around the ecosystem. You've established some real partnerships for funding, programming, mm-hmm. your location, and so on. But I think what's super impressive is that y'all got off the ground and running so quickly. And that's just a testament to mm-hmm. you and Elizabeth and April's tenacity and your determination to do something about it. And also to the support ecosystem here, the entrepreneur support ecosystem and funders here in Northwest Arkansas, and even across to what I'll call our super region into Oklahoma as well. Will you talk about your funders and your partners and how are they supporting you? Sure. And how has that experience been working with them so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So we couldn't do this without our partners. Otherwise, it'd just be an idea and we'd mm-hmm. still be in that room together, just complaining about all the issues. So I will start kind of from the beginning of, actually you and Toby Teeter were first kind of supporters, like getting kind of the groundswell going of, hey, what could this become? And so I have to say thank you, first of all, to Bentonville Economic Development, the Chamber of Commerce, and also to the UA Collaborative, because you guys gave us space. You gave us a platform to start having conversations, which is what we did. We started with an event and, mm-hmm. More of a roundtable. And then that morphed into what it is today, which is we're a nonprofit. And now we have an accelerator that we're running. And so we were able to deliver and become more of an organization and put more, meat on the bones because of our partnership with a group called Stitch Crew out of Oklahoma City. Erica Lucas is the founder of that organization. And she is a powerhouse, in the supporting women and minority founders in their journey to growing and scaling companies. And so we saw an immediate alignment with that organization. And what was cool is we really liked their accelerator playbook that they've curated for founders. It's all about customizing the programming to the founders in each cohort. It's all about peer-to-peer mentorship. And so we really love their flexible model. So we partnered with them. Mm-hmm. And then together we got a Walton Family Foundation grant. So also another key core partner to FemHealth Founders and to Stitch Crew and the FemHealth Accelerator, which is our joint, project together, program together. And then lastly, we recently have a partnership with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arkansas, which has been just a phenomenal addition to all of the work that we're doing here locally, but to bring in more healthcare experts into what we're doing and saying. And there have been some other, smaller partners along the way who've supported us across the ecosystem here.
That's really incredible. I mean, what's happened has happened over the course of a dozen months or so.
Yes.
that all this could come together. And I think it really says a lot about this ecosystem and the density of support that's available and the folks that are available. But what I know is that if you get entrepreneurs in a room and just give them the time and space, they'll figure out what to do from there and what they need from you. And
so true.
And I love it that that you and your team were able to do that. You've generated a lot of interest since launching FemHealth Founders and announcing it. What's that been like so far? How's it been accepted locally and beyond?
Yeah. We've been surprised at every corner. I think we're so used to that scarcity mindset. I think especially as women in entrepreneurship, just feeling like maybe the minority, and then you add women's health to it and it's an even smaller, we've been told, oh, such a small market, not huge problems that you're solving, which we totally disagree with. But we have mostly gotten massive support from everyone we've engaged with. So locally, regionally, across the Heartland. And just an example, when we opened up our first accelerator, we got over 200 applications, and
That's impressive.
We're a no-name organization, but Stitch Crew is well known. But we had just people that responded so well to, we want to be a part of this kind of community. And some of these, founders have gone through big accelerators, like big name accelerators, and they're still looking for that community. So I will say everyone has responded and reacted so positively, and across the world. I mean, we have applications from Israel and the UK and, Silicon Valley and New York and Boston. So if that tells you anything about the need, it's there.
Yeah, isn't that neat? What I heard you talk about was scarcity mindset in a place, though, where there's an abundance mindset. Right. So I think that's probably helpful. And gosh, this myth that it's a small market drives me nuts.
Right.
Half of the people in the world are women. Yeah. I think I would like to have that market.
Right. And just because you view it as a small market today, on paper, 80% of consumers are women.
That's right.
Like you said, half of the world's population are women. And then add in that this is projected to be $1 trillion market by 2027. I wouldn't call that small. And it's expansive beyond just what you may, I think a lot of people may think of as women's health, which would just be like reproductive health. It's so much bigger than that. It's, heart health, it's menopause. It's hormonal conditions to fertility, to pregnancy, to, adolescence and the things that you go through in adolescence, and autoimmune disease and beyond, cancers, things like that. So
just the economic impact from solving these maybe it's quadrillions.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's a lot. So let's talk about the accelerator. This first cohort's wrapping up soon. In fact, when we drop this episode, folks, be watching out. We'll drop this episode on a Monday, and then we'll drop a bonus episode on that Friday. Okay. And that bonus episode will be with the members of the cohort talking about themselves and their companies. And so you'll get to hear about all of that. What's it been like running your first accelerator?
It's been great. I will say, having Stitch Crew as a partner where this isn't their first rodeo. They know what they're doing. And getting to just experience, what is it like to be a founder in the women's health space in an environment where you're heard, you're seen, you're valued for what you're working on, and you're supported. And so, we give a $10,000 non-dilutive stipend or grant award. There's really no strings attached to it, but please spend it on your business.
It's amazing.
To each founder. The founders in this cohort are addressing fundamental women's health issues across gynecology, postpartum, pregnancy to postpartum, trauma-informed care, pelvic floor dysfunction, and fertility. So we have kind of across the whole spectrum, we have women addressing issues and with phenomenal backgrounds. I mean, these women are, some of them are clinicians that decided to go found their own business. One of them comes from Boston Consulting Group. Another one has a long career just in this kind of trauma-informed care space and has her own personal experience with trauma. And so we just have this beautiful cohort of not only, impactful women, but brilliant, intelligent, motivated people who are solving women's health issues. And so what we have loved the most about this and maybe been surprised the most, like at first, honestly, I was a little bit skeptical how this whole peer-to-peer mentorship would go. But it's been the very thing that the founders have benefited from the most is hearing from their peers, getting resources, getting guidance, getting feedback from their peers on how the accelerator, how they could, improve their, whatever piece of their business that they have, brought to the table in front of the other founders. So there's a lot of vulnerability and transparency too.
That is one of the things I love about accelerators done right.
Right.
Is that's where most of the learning happens. And, you're in it together. The founders are in it together, and they're going to be there to lift each other up done right. Yeah. And it is an amazing atmosphere when accelerators get that right.
It is.
What sort of, so you brought to the table then all these folks who have the knowledge and the experience and expertise in their fields, and they're solving problems that they know are real problems. Right. What sort of support and programming then do you put around them so that they learn how to start and build and scale a business?
Yeah, it's a great question. We tried with this first cohort, we started with founders that had already launched, at least soft launched their companies. So we'd love to eventually take on, that idea stage, earlier stage companies, but we thought it was important to kind of test this model with this group because they had already started. So they have the basic infrastructure set up, but what's interesting is kind of interviewing them on the front end and understanding where their weaknesses are and where their weak areas infrastructurally are, allowed us to plug in resources. And so Stitch Crew has this, just amazing like swath of just tech resources, mentors in their back pocket to really deploy specifically based on the needs that the founders brought up. So I will say we've had a lot of focus, on capacity, on legal support. So we have some incredible mentors, and I will say many of the mentors are from Northwest Arkansas. So we have an incredible base here. An incredible passion around helping these women, but giving legal, just something as basic as 2 hours. I've had a couple of these attorneys spend 2 hours, totally free with these women and focused on very specific things in their business that needed legal attention that would have otherwise cost them $600, $700. So that was a really cool piece, is just the legal side, capacity, fundraising, and is always a highlight, especially for women. This has been a big topic, is just, whether that's VC or other types of financing for the business. We have provided a number of connections to venture capitalists, other loans, grant programs, resources. So we make those direct connections for the founders, so that they can, not only just have someone to talk to or pitch to, but actually connecting them to like-minded investors, like-minded, financial providers who want to support women and their unique needs.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Talk about then the most challenging part generally for the founders? What's been the most challenging part of the accelerator, and also for your team, or the most, you talked about surprising, so most challenging or most interesting part?
Yeah. So I would say one of the challenges is just there's not enough time. We and the hope is that we would be able to provide support to these founders over their entire lifetime of their business. We're building relationships here, not just companies. And so I think one of the challenging things is just having enough time. One of the founders brought that up yesterday. It was like, how do I manage all of these different events and deliverables and building a product or a platform and, managing staff and all the things that come with being a founder. And likewise for us as founders, running and building FemHealth Founders, we deal with the same things. Like, where is that trade-off? When do you say, I don't have time for this? And that may be, I don't have time for an accelerator, or I don't have time to do, the homework involved in the accelerator, which, by the way, we don't give homework just because, it's just another thing that founders have to do. And we really want them focusing on their companies. So the homework is, if it's, okay, you need to understand what a P&L is, and you need to really build that out, and here, let us help you do that. Or build out your pitch deck, or improve, an executive summary, whatever it is. We get really tactical there. But I would just say that 8 weeks has just flown by. So time is really one of the biggest challenges. But the most interesting thing I would say has been, I go back to the peer-to-peer. I had no idea how much power that could have. And just not only improving, I guess, the program itself and making the experience better, but just elevating and motivating the founders. Like, when you feel that energy, especially around something like women's health, like, oh, she's building a business and she's doing this and she's pulling it off, and she's a mom too. Like, and not everybody's a mom in the cohort, but it's doable,
Yeah.
So.
Excellent. Well, you're not asking for advice from me today, but I'll give you some, because I've run accelerators.
Please do.
I've helped run accelerators. And I'll say that when the official 8 weeks is over, the next big challenge that happens is all that intensity that's happening over the period of 8 weeks. Sometimes founders feel like there's nobody there to support them when it's over. And so now your challenge will be to keep that conversation going. Right. Like you said, you're building relationships. And so really carrying those relationships forward and looking for the support that they need going forward, and helping continue to connect them to more mentors and more folks who can be helpful to them. Yeah. But
that's great advice.
Love hearing about all this. Since you're supporting women founders, we definitely need to talk about issues that especially affect women. One of them I'll call the elephant in the room or in the studio is, because you've mentioned it, is funding. Yeah. Women founders get an astonishingly small amount of funding. In fact, the high point has been 2% in a given year of all venture, and that's for venture capital funding, but it's astonishing low for all types of funding. And this is despite that the data proves that women-led companies are more profitable, they're more sustainable, they have a better ROI on the in the realm of multiples better than men. And so I'm just wondering, at what point do investors wake up and realize that they can apply their greed here too?
Right. I'm wondering the same thing.
And make some money. It seems pretty silly. Why is this happening? And what can we do about it?
Well, I think there's a multifaceted, multi-layered thing going on here, and it runs across bias, systemic bias that's existed, and still persists today. It's both men and women. We don't necessarily trust women with money, with finances. And I think that's one of the root causes. If you think about how we've traditionally viewed women. And if you look at some of the numbers around women managing wealth, even just family wealth, there's just, you don't see a big representation of women doing that, or in finance or investing roles. And you don't see very many women who have had the opportunity to grow and scale these big companies. And then add in the underrepresentation of women in the STEM, technology space. You start to construct a worldview and sort of a bias against women in these types of CEO founder roles, especially I think in technology, healthcare, these spaces that we've traditionally viewed men as solving those problems and being in those spaces. And then you also have, a historical issue of women doing the lion's share of unpaid labor. And so often we view women in a way that's, okay, you're a mom and you have children, how are you going to also operate a business? Well, okay, if you're married and you have a husband or a partner, well, aren't they also, they also have children.
That's right.
But we've just viewed that differently because we think automatically oftentimes that the man in the relationship is going to be the breadwinner. And so, we have to shift that thinking. And especially I think from an investor standpoint, it's just very, the expectations are different. And so what it creates sometimes is this perception that, well, women now are held to a higher standard. So I want to make sure that everything that she tells me in a pitch is perfect. And so women often end up being on defense instead of offense. I think, we've had a number of people mention this over the past few weeks just in the entrepreneurship space. And it really stood out to me because I often have felt that too, that I'm not necessarily believed or trusted. And maybe I don't have the technical or the finance background. And so I'm viewed differently in terms of like, I'm going to give you money to launch and scale this business. So I think what we can do, so those are some negative, things that are getting in our way. We can be aware of your own biases, unpack that, like sit down with, another woman and understand like, hey, where am I off base? Start trying to assess companies more from a data focused perspective and maybe you have to institute certain things like a blind review of pitches instead of, actually knowing the gender of the person presenting or pitching that company. And then I would say ultimately just start trusting women. Like, if your background is, you have a ton of experience and you have earned the right to be in the room, and to grow and scale a business, like, don't hold that woman to a different set of standards. And then I guess the work we have to do to increase the number of women that are actually growing and scaling companies or pitching to VCs, we have a lot of work to do there because it's not just on the investors and it's not just people having biases and women aren't getting the capital. There's another side to the story. Women aren't asking for a lot of this capital. So we've got to figure out what to do in between there.
Yeah, I want to go back to this thing about bias and holding women to a higher standard. And in fact, it's not anecdotal. It's not people kind of feel that way. The data proves it. Right. This has actually been studied. It turns out that on average, and this is whether the person asking the question is male or female, but on average, women entrepreneurs are asked more risk-based questions than men, and men entrepreneurs are asked more questions that are really encouraging questions and that doesn't make sense to me. So we do need to be aware. We need to be aware of how we're asking questions, and we really need to have sort of a, I'll call it a format for asking questions so that we are making certain not to do that. It was very discouraging.
It is. And you know what, James, that starts in childhood. I mean, I can recall memories of, the boys in the room being kind of applauded for thinking outside the box or going around the rules and not staying in the lines. And women are more applauded and rewarded for perfection, for completion of an assignment or organization. And that is something we have to shift a lot earlier in our thinking, because one, not every woman fits in that box,
Right.
but two, our educators, I think, need to, and our parents need to do a better job of not putting those types of, we're encouraging, boys to be more risk takers and women to actually kind of shy away from risk.
Yeah, we need to encourage our boys and our girls.
Yeah. Yes.
To be risk takers.
That's right.
And I don't understand why we don't.
Right.
But that's just me. I do have some encouraging news.
Oh.
I don't think I guess since I've seen her say it at a couple of events in the last 2 days, but I don't know that there's been any press about it yet. So I won't say who.
Okay.
I won't say who the company is, but there is a local woman-led company that just closed their Series A for $12.6 million.
What? This is so exciting.
And that
I don't know
funding
about
comes
this.
from all over the place.
Wow.
From locally and across the country, and the places that you would
Amazing.
expect money would be coming from too. So it's very exciting.
It's incredible.
Well, there are plenty of amazing women out there who are also wives and mothers and entrepreneurs. And I think you kind of spoke to this answer a little bit when you said that we should not think of men as being the breadwinners, and it just sounds like more free work by women when we do that. But how in the world do you successfully, all three of you as co-founders, are wives and mothers and entrepreneurs, and you have your businesses, and you have the FemHealth Founders organization. How do you successfully navigate all of this in your life?
I don't know that it's always successfully. We do,
which is okay.
Thank God for makeup. Like, someone said that to me the other day. They're like, "We don't look like you're not sleeping or you're working, until midnight every night." And the truth is, I do. I often have to, put my baby down to sleep and then crank up, another series, a few hours of work, and forego the Netflix that I'd love to be watching in order to do that. And there are a lot of hobbies I'd love to be, pursuing. But I just feel like this work, and we, Elizabeth, April, and I have all felt like this work is just work that has to be done, and who's going to do it? Because no one's, there are other people working towards this, but no one's really doing this thing, and it has to be done. And so there is some strategy that's going into this. We can't continue to, run our businesses and grow them and also grow this organization. So we're going to be looking for talent in the next few months to help us run the organization. But, I think we just try to view it from what can we do today? And it may seem like a lot to other people, but we enjoy it. And I do think a lot of women have that social impact bone in their body. They just want to build something with impact and purpose. And I'm not saying there are plenty of men who want to do that too, but women seem to be very driven by that generally. And so it doesn't feel like work, I guess.
Yeah. Well, let's switch it up a little bit. We talked about how good Northwest Arkansas has been to FemHealth Founders. I'd love to hear a little bit more about you in terms of where you're from.
Yeah.
Lost my voice for a moment there. Where you're from, places you've lived. I looked at your Facebook. I looked at the places you've lived. I think they're very interesting. I'd love to know a little bit more about that, and how in the world you ended up in Northwest Arkansas. And I think you may have talked about that a little bit earlier. But
yeah, sure. Well, sometimes I forget some of the places that I've gotten to live, just because now my life feels sort of boring in the sense that I live in Northwest Arkansas and things aren't as crazy as they were in my 20s, but I love it here. There's so much adventure. Like I said, I'm from Memphis, ended up, going to college in the Middle Tennessee area, UT Chattanooga. And then after college, I'm a millennial, and I graduated in 2009, which was a wonderful time to be entering the job market. Just kidding. So after, amidst the financial collapse, I just was trying to get whatever work I could. And so I spent some time in Nashville, and I met my husband at that time in that place. And we ended up, kind of embarking on a crazy journey overseas. We worked in international development for a company called Salt, and we were doing like sustainable agriculture. Basically, we were building soybean mills in places like Afghanistan, northern Afghanistan, and northern Iraq, to really just improve food security in those places. And so we worked with a number of partners throughout that. I got to work at a women's center doing kind of women's empowerment work. But yeah, Afghanistan in 2010 and 11, Iraq in 2011, 12. And then we kind of decided we're going to come back home. And we were a little bit burned out, I'll admit. And we ended up looking at PhD programs for my husband. And University of Arkansas had this amazing scholarship program called the DDF, a Distinguished Doctoral Fellow, which is, I believe, supported by the Walton family. And it literally paid for us to go to school, which was amazing. So had, like a small salary. So it was a no-brainer, and we love the mountains and the outdoors. So we came here, and in between being here and kind of pursuing our careers, we moved to India for a year. So have lived in India as well. And that was an incredible experience too, but we're here now. So
that is an extraordinary journey.
Yeah.
You've lived a life of making a difference.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I like to say that.
Well, you're continuing to do it. So,
thank you.
What, I think you just hinted at it, but what makes this the ideal place to live for you and your family? And I'll add to that, why should others be thinking about Bentonville and Northwest Arkansas for themselves and for their companies?
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't construct a more perfect place in my mind, except maybe if there was a beach. The ocean would be great if we just threw it in here. But I will tell you that this place with the outdoors, which is like our number one thing, we love being outside, and it's just beautiful here. There's so much, infrastructure, even just in the city with the trails and ability to jump out and go on a long run and, take our son to the park, and just gorgeous. Everything is just gorgeous. And that's inspiring to me and to my husband. So we're all about just natural wonders. So if you love that, like, this is the place to be. But it's an inspiring place because of this entrepreneurial ecosystem. I've never experienced anything like this in my life, and I'm not sure there is another place like this. In terms of community, of people who will rally around you, I have had CEOs of big companies here basically say, let me help you scale your company, that, really don't have time for me, but they make time. I've had people, like you and others in this community that have just supported over and over the work that we're doing with FemHealth Founders, highlighting, me as an individual, as an entrepreneur, the other women who are with FemHealth Founders. And so I just don't think you can find that kind of hospitality and goodwill and community anywhere else.
Yeah, I was just having this conversation the other day, actually, at Leadership Benton County. I spoke to the current cohort, and this conversation came up about, is there another place really like this? Right. And we had a hard time putting our finger on anywhere else that, you have this unique geography here. You have everything outdoors except snow and ocean.
Yep.
You get a few inches of snow a year, and that's it. But you have this combination of these large businesses and the businesses supporting them, and an unbelievable small business and super robust entrepreneurial ecosystem, a density of entrepreneurial support organizations unlike I've seen anywhere. And then you have a region and a city in particular here in Bentonville where 64% of the people who live here weren't born here. They came here to build something, to do something. And that's happening all across this region. And it's created something really unique. And then you add to it government and families and corporations and folks just all moving together, not necessarily scripted, but moving together in the same direction.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating to watch it all play out.
It is.
Let's narrow our talk a little bit more. In fact, speaking of accelerators and startups, after all, this is the Bentonville Beacon podcast, so we should probably talk about Bentonville a little. Yeah. Many of the major accelerators in our region, and by my count, we're somewhere around 10 or 11 in a place, in a region of a little over 500,000 people, about 550,000 people. And most of those are centered here in Bentonville, a town of 60,000 people, and it's mind-boggling to me. And most of them are in Bentonville's Art and Market District or downtown at the Ledger, the world's first bikeable building. Check it out. Shameless plug. There's an episode on it.
Super cool building.
Yeah. So they're all in close proximity, right, to the chamber, to Bentonville Economic Development, more importantly, to other startups, to innovation assets, to executive training from the University of Arkansas, from many offerings from the U of A, to a multitude of investors and more. And, you know, what is it that you would say about Bentonville that's attracting this density of entrepreneur support organizations and the startups that go with them?
I think there's an energy here that I haven't seen in other places. And so it's sort of this gravitational pull. You know, I'd say I live in Fayetteville, so I'm going to just out myself. I live in Fayetteville, and you know, we come up here now all the time, especially with FemHealth Founders stuff. I mean, this is where we are. And so I think, you know, you walk around and you sort of see like, you know, all these companies and all these people biking around and this sort of entrepreneurial vibe. And then you have the cultural, you know, pieces like Crystal Bridges that I think really, again, add to that kind of gravitational pull. It's where I want to take, you know, my friends and family when they come to visit, because I want them to see like, this is an incredible thing. Like, we have all of these amazing cultural experiences here too. And so I think entrepreneurship and the support you can provide, it's about the landscape. It's about, you know, the aesthetic. It's about the food and the energy. And so all of those things are in Bentonville. And you're seeing that just grow tremendously. I mean, I don't know, 8 years ago, I don't know that I would have just come up to Bentonville, you know, besides to go to Crystal Bridges. And that is just completely transformed.
Well put.
Did I sell it?
Did you sell it? No, I'm finding all the same to be true. I've been here a couple of years, and I'm just, even in a couple of years, I feel like this place is recreated itself, so to speak, if that's the right word to use. And it feels like it's going to do that again.
Right.
And, you know, what's happened in the last 5 or 10 years, as they say, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Right.
From what I'm seeing, it's
true.
It boggles the mind.
It's true.
Okay. We're going to start wrapping up, but first I want you to, will you share a story? We'll call this a hashtag because Bentonville story. This is something that, you know, perhaps could only happen here or describes the essence of this place.
So that's a really good question. I am going to just have to talk about FemHealth Founders and how, you know, we recently had an incredible summit, a Women's Health Innovation Summit here in Northwest Arkansas with Blue Cross Blue Shield. And, you know, we weren't sure what this event was going to be like because, you know, we're newly working with Blue Cross and trying to, you know, as you said, figure out how we're going to do all of this amidst running an accelerator, running our own businesses. And then Blue Cross, you know, they don't have tons of spare time on their hands either. Yeah. But this event, the people in the room, the people who showed up, and it was an incredible event. I mean, we had the CIO of Kindbody do the keynote. We had a panel of women founders, investors, ecosystem support, and entrepreneurial support organizations. And Jeanette from the Northwest Arkansas Council. And it was just, everybody said at the end of it, they were sort of transfixed by the experience. And they were like, how'd you pull this off? How'd you pull this off? And we're like, it's the place that we're in, it's that people don't have the same egos that you see maybe in other places, or the same boundaries, or the separation between corporate and entrepreneurship, and the community. There were people represented from all those different spaces across healthcare, economic development, entrepreneurship, other nonprofits that are doing great work in the women's health or healthcare space. And everybody was like, oh, it was just such an incredible event where I got to network and get to meet people that I'd never met before. But I just say that because that event was a testament to, we can bring people from all over the world. I mean, the CIO of Kindbody came from New York City. Like, she lives in Manhattan, I don't know if she wants me to tell everybody that, but she, she came here and she saw value in, speaking to these people on maternal health issues. And so I'll just say that event was really a prime example of why this place is so unique and special.
Yeah. I mean, it is. And you also are dealing with I'll call it a unique and special insurance company there too.
Right.
You can't say that very often about payers in the healthcare industry. But Arkansas Blue Cross Blue Shield is very innovative and is really going to be making some waves here in the next few years, especially alongside Alice Walton and the medical school and the healthcare system that's being built and as such. I'm blown away by what they're doing, and really impressed, of course, by Martine Pollard, who I imagine just
she's our champion.
Immediately said yes without hearing the rest of what you were asking. So that's fantastic. And she's also on our board at the chamber. She chairs the board at the chamber.
That's right.
Yeah.
Perfect person to be doing this work.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Just a few questions left. We'll start with this one, sort of a random. What's the stupidest business mistake that you've ever made that you don't regret?
Oh, that's a great question. I started a company called Polished Papers. This was my first ever company that I started, and it did really well. So I was editing academic manuscripts for professors, researchers all over the world. But what I didn't realize is that I had to do, so, as the person doing all of the editing, I took on any client that I could get. And that was just, me being a novice. Like, yes, I will take your paper that isn't even written in English, and I will try to write it in English. And so that proved to be a very difficult business to scale, because I could never hire somebody to do the same level of editing that I had gotten myself into. But I would say, I don't know if you call it stupid, but it was just, I didn't understand what I was doing and getting into. Now, I had good revenue. I mean, I was making income, but I was working constantly because I was editing 30, 40-page manuscripts. And oftentimes they weren't, they're really, the grammar and the language was totally incorrect. So I will probably make much bigger business mistakes over the next few years. You can ask me later.
Absolutely. Well, we've all made them.
Yeah.
I can tell you a few of mine. Some are still painful to this day. What advice would you give to other women who are considering starting a business?
Great question. The most important piece of advice that I've been given, and I don't always take this advice, but don't second guess yourself. And I say that to women because women often do this. we don't feel capable enough. We don't feel ready enough. But just go for it, because I guarantee you most likely are ready to either pitch your business or, bring on a customer or build that product. Trust those instincts, trust yourself. And if you can do that, the other stuff you can learn and figure out, and you can hire people and you can contract people to do the stuff that you don't know what to do, or maybe you're not trained to do it. But I think you just have to trust yourself and you have to go for it. Otherwise, you'll never do it.
That is sage advice. 2 questions left.
Yes.
The first one, if somebody wants to learn more about FemHealth Founders or reach any of you, how do they do that?
It's FemHealthFounders.com. You can just go to the website. There's you can contact us there, or you can reach out via LinkedIn. All of us are logged into the page, and we monitor the messages there. We're also on Instagram. Again, it's FemHealth Founders. That's the handle for LinkedIn and Instagram, and we'd love to chat with you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Last question.
Yes.
What's something I should have asked you that I did not ask?
Wow. I feel like you've asked me a lot of really good things.
Awesome.
So I don't have anything. So I think we can probably say this was a pretty rich conversation.
Wonderful. I love it. So, well, Natalie, thank you so much for spending time with me, with the Bentonville Beacon audience. I think you already know that I'm a raving fan for you and Elizabeth and April. I love the work that you are doing, and that you 3 are going to change some lives.
Oh, thank you.
Not just here, but well beyond this place and perhaps across the world.
Oh, thank you, James. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Hey, thanks to our Bentonville Beacon audience. Without you, the show wouldn't be possible. So if you like what you heard today, please share this episode with your friends and colleagues, and share it on social media or however you may do that. And keep coming back to hear more about Bentonville's leaders and their businesses that are sparking the rise of this place, and Bentonville, Northwest Arkansas, where you get more of what you want and less of what you don't. You can check out all of our episodes at bentonvillebeacon.com or on your favorite podcast player. Thanks. We'll see you next time.